I'd like to welcome everyone to our Bible class this morning on the parables of Jesus. Um, a little bit of mistake I made last week at the end. I kind of gave a teaser for the wrong parable. I'm not going to give it again, so it's okay. So if you're coming here expecting one particular type of parable today, my apologies. I had the wrong parable in mind when I gave a teaser for it. But we do have an excellent parable to study today. And to me, it's one that is often misunderstood or it's well known. Everybody that has that's a Christian or have been raised in church or part of the faith has probably heard the parable at some point in time, but they often gloss over some of the deeper meaning behind it, and that's what we're going to look into today with this parable. Um, Quick recap of the parables before we've been talking about how uh, the message, the gospel of Christ is love, and how it acts when we take hold of it. And we've talked about the differences possibly between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God being here on the earth, the physical manifestation or showing, where the kingdom of heaven can also often be looked at as something internal or indwelling. And if you've not had a chance to go and look at the previous parables, I invite you to do so because they all are interconnected. And that's the beauty of the parables, that Jesus is not necessarily teaching different lessons with each parable. What he's doing is he's teaching a message in a different way to try to make people truly grasp what he's trying to say. Last week, remember, we talked about how love and forgiveness were intertwined, and how Jesus seemed to say that if you cannot forgive, you can't truly love, because forgiveness is a requirement of love. Well, today we're going to talk some more about the way Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven, and think about it from the standpoint of being internal inside of us. Now, some would say, well, it's the same kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, and that's fine. But like we said before, if you look at the kingdom of heaven being internal spiritually versus something that's manifest physically, it could have differences. So just keep that in mind as we read this parable. The parable of the laborers in the vineyard. And this is found in Matthew 20, 1 through 6. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After entering with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. And when he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. And when he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to them, "Friend, am I doing you no wrong? Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Now, if we look at it from a Christian perspective, this is a very familiar parable. It's the idea that salvation, no matter when you come to salvation, is there for you. Whether you're raised in the church from a child. Maybe you were christened. Maybe you go through confirmation. You've always been raised in church. And so it becomes a natural fit for you like a glove. There are some that may not come to faith until later on, maybe in high school, college, maybe till marriage. And then when you start a family, you start focusing on these things and you come to faith. And then some people maybe not to the later in life, towards the twilight. And then when you look back and you decide, you know what, there's got to be more than this. And maybe that's when you come to faith. So Christians, or we're taught in Christianity from a Christian perspective, that the easy answer to this parable is that it is a parable about salvation, and that when you're saved. That it doesn't matter if you were raised in church or sometime during your life you came, or even towards the end before death. If you've come to Christ, salvation is still there for you. And that's the most common explanation given of this parable. Um, I have been to listen to sermons. I've listened to people talk about how does this work with, getting crowned or jewels in your crown, being able to get rewarded in heaven, and who gets to be where. And the issue is, according to this parable, if you go strictly from a salvation standpoint, it doesn't matter when you're saved. It doesn't matter if it's a deathbed confession. It doesn't matter if you were, uh, you know, christened as a child and raised in church. The idea from a Christian's perspective is that whenever you're saved is what's important. And that's fairly typical of most, and that's a summary basically of most people who use this parable when they're describing Christianity. Would anyone disagree with that, or have they heard a different perspective, maybe in church or in a different class, of what this parable meant from that perspective? Okay. Um, but like we said before, we're not looking at these parables through that Christian perspective. And the reason why, Jesus was not a Christian. He was a Jew speaking to Jews. And I don't mean to make light of Christianity. I am a Christian. You're a Christian. We practice Christianity. But I think what we tend to do is we look back through our own view and not really listen to what Jesus is saying. So I want to take a minute and kind of dissect this parable and not use salvation and not focus on that role of it. Let's think about what he was talking to his followers, the people that he was sharing this parable with. First, you've got the kingdom of heaven. We've talked about that we're looking at what does it mean to follow the teachings of Christ? What does it mean to be with God? What does it mean to experience Him internally? That's what we're looking at from this perspective. It's like a landowner went out early in the morning to hire laborers. So we're talking about probably dawn, or at sunrise, somewhere at that point in time. Didn't really say a specific time. Then, after agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, which we said was approximately a denarii, and we talked about that last week, all that, how much that is, and we won't go through that math again. But if you're welcome to watch last week's lesson and get caught up on that, he sent him into his vineyard. Then he went out about 9 o'clock and he saw others standing idle and said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." Now, this is kind of interesting because you've got a landowner you would think knows how much needs to be harvested in his vineyard. And so he goes and hires people at the beginning. But did he mess up? Did he say, you know what, I underestimated how much was there? Um, I don't know that. There's nothing there that suggests that, but some have wondered, okay, instead of hiring everybody at the beginning, why does the landowner go hire some? And then he comes back at 9 o'clock and hires some more. He sees others standing idle in the marketplace and says to them, "You also go into vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." The landowner does not say, I will pay you a day's wage. The landowner does not say, I will pay you a certain amount or prorata. I will pay you whatever is right. And so they went. When he went out again about noon and 3 o'clock, did the same. So here's three different times the landowner is going and getting people to come work in his vineyard at different times of the day. And about 5 o'clock, went out and found others standing around. And he said unto them, why are you standing here idle all day? And they said to him, because no one has hired us. Okay. Very interesting. Because if they've been there all day, why weren't they hired in the morning when the landowner first went out? Don't know. It doesn't explain it. And it's real easy to look at these people as being layabouts, as being lazy. You know, why are you standing here idle all day? And they say, because no one hired us. So it's almost like, landowner, we were here. You didn't hire us. We were willing to work. You didn't bring us in. And so the landowner said, you also go into the vineyard. So I'm hoping you're starting to see how complex this parable really is as we're getting into it. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the manager, call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and going to the first. So those that were hired at 5 o'clock, they received a daily wage. They didn't know how much they were getting. The landowner never told them, you'll get a full daily wage for working maybe an hour or two, because 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sun sets around 6, 7, depends. So, you know, they didn't work an awful lot compared to maybe those that started at sunrise. But it gave them the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but they also received the usual daily wage. And then they received it and they grumbled against the landowner, saying, they only worked 1 hour and you made them equal to us who borne the burden of the day in scorching heat. So again, here we go. I'm sitting here. Normally, you know, if the landowner had paid those first people first, there wouldn't be a controversy. Because think about it. If he had paid the people that came at sunrise first and sent them on their way, and then paid the next group, nobody before knows what the next person's getting. It's only those at the end, the last paid, who saw what everybody else is getting paid. So there was a point to this. There's a specific reason why the landowner did not pay those who were hired first. He waited till they were last. And then instead of giving them what they thought they were going to get, a greater amount because we worked more, he gave them exactly that daily wage. And they were upset. They were angry. But he replied to him, friend, am I doing you no wrong? Did you not agree with me for this usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I chose to give you this last, the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first and the first will be last. And that is a line that's used in a lot of the parables. Jesus talks about the last being first and the first being last a lot. In fact, it's a different story. We're reminded in this parable of the wedding feast, where we're admonished, or Jesus admonished his apostles. If you're invited to a feast, don't go sit at the head table. Don't go sit in a place of prestige and honor thinking, well, I was invited. Surely they meant for me to be at the front. Because then the guest, the host may say, no, 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 that's not your seat. You don't belong here. You belong towards the back. And so you're embarrassed. You're dishonored. You feel like you've been slighted. Jesus said, no, find the place at the back towards the end of the table. And then if the host says, no, we're going to move you to the front, you need to be closer up here, then you're given honor because people see that you are worthy. And it kind of is going in this same mold with this parable here about this idea of worth and worthiness. So let's get off it for a second, the idea that this is about money, and let's get off of it that it's about, getting paid. And let's think about it from the standpoint of what's the purpose? What is Jesus talking about when he says, if you have the indwelling of God, if you have the love of Christ inside you, the kingdom of heaven as it is, how does this vineyard story apply to that? Well, think about what the labor was. If it follows the trend of what we've talked about in the previous parables, the labor, what these workers are supposed to be doing is sharing the love of Christ, planting the seeds. We talked about in previous weeks how the kingdom of heaven was like soil. And we scattered seed on the soil and watched it come up. And we've talked about how that sometimes you may get 100-fold reward or crop or fruit from that seed. You may get 60-fold, you may get 30-fold. So it's in that same vein, that same idea that Jesus is talking about, that we are to be spreading the love of God. We're to be spreading that love thy neighbor, love God, love each other. And that's the labor and all that it entails in doing. And when you do that, then you get rewarded. Now, what is the reward we've talked about? Well, we talk as Christians about salvation, but we also talked last week how the reward of loving each other is that we are loved in return. We are also forgiven of our transgressions. We're also embraced by God and called to Him. And so you would think, hey, that's enough just to be in the love of God. But think about how we do things. Think about how we are as people. Think about how we say from a church perspective. How many times do we look at a newcomer that comes to worship, or someone in our organization? Maybe we are part of a benevolent society. Maybe we're part of a club. Maybe it's just our family. Maybe it's just we have aunts and uncles, nieces, nephews, parents, grandparents, and there's a newlywed that has joined the family. How often, instead of embracing them as an equal, do we look at them and say, you know what? You got to wait your turn. You got to earn your keep. We've been here longer. We're part of this family longer. We've been part of this organization longer. We've been part of this church longer. So we should have more of a say so in what goes on than you, who are a newcomer. You need to just, sit to the back and kind of, listen and not be heard. Is that does that make any sense, or does anybody have any thoughts about that? Um,
It
doc,
does make sense. And I was just going to go back to the talking about salvation,
mm-hmm,
where it doesn't matter if you're christened, you came later, or a twilight, you all still receive the same reward.
mm-hmm. And exactly, and that's what this parable is all about. That it doesn't matter when you came. It doesn't matter when you chose to do the good work. Um, do the work. Do the best you can. The reward is the same. The riches that you get, the salvation, if you look at it from that standpoint, the goodness on earth, the rewards of doing good, you get it just the same. Um, if I have been a I'm going to use being a teacher because I am a teacher. I'm an educator, been in education almost 24 years now. The joy I experience now when I see a child learn is no less or no more than it did my first year of teaching. The joy is still there. That excitement to see someone get excited about learning and be a part of it is still there. It doesn't change. It doesn't matter that if I've been teaching 10 years that the joy changes. It doesn't. Now I may get better at it because I have practice, but that feeling is still there. The reward of loving somebody else is the same whether you've been loving people all your life or you're just now deciding, you know what, I need to start loving people. I need to start putting aside that old way. I need to get turned from what I used to do and be good people. But how many of us get afraid to do that? How many of us are afraid that we're going to be judged by our fellows, by our neighbors, by our family, by our church family, by our coworkers, whatever, because we weren't doing this all the time. We're late, relatively speaking, to the work. That's why I think Jesus in this parable said, well, I'm going to pay the people that came last first, the landowner did. Because it does two things. Number one, it shows those that came at the end, they're just as worthy. They get no less. They're not penalized. They're not harmed. They're not treated poorly. They're treated as equals. So, number one. Number two, it also shows those that have been there all along. You being here all along does not diminish what your worth is, but you get what you get because I gave it to you. Keep that in mind. He says, I chose, am I not allowed to do with to do what I choose with what belongs to me? If I am the employer and I set the wage, that's my right. You know, of course we have laws of wages and so forth. That's not what I'm trying to get into. The point is, it's not somebody else's place that if we have an agreement to get mad of my agreement with somebody else. That's not anything to you, because I am I not allowed to do with mine what's mine, or are you envious because I'm generous? And that's a kicker. That's hard for us as people and as Christians, because we think because we've worked harder, we've worked longer, we have sacrificed more, our reward should be more. And that's not how it works. This is a parable about grace. I've always been told grace is what you need. If you need a little grace, you get a little grace. If you need a lot of grace, you get a lot of grace. That's what this is hinting towards in this parable. That you get what you deserve, you get what you need, should I say. Let me back up. You get what you need because of the generosity of that who is providing. For whatever reason, the people that came early, they worked the whole time. They received what they were owed. The people that came late, for whatever reason they were late coming, they received what they were owed. But the landowner chose to give them the same. When we love each other, and we love each other with the love of Christ, as this parable presents itself to me, what it's doing is it's saying that we as people, as humans, as Christians, we don't get to pick and choose who gets the love. We don't get to pick and choose how much love they get. We don't get to pick and choose their place in this world, or in our church, or in our family, or in our friendship. Jesus says in this parable that the landowner, and if we assume the landowner is a stand-in for God, that God makes that choice. And God just simply says, are you doing the work? Don't care when you came. Don't care when you started. Don't care if it's the best in the world or the worst in the world. Nowhere is quality of work ever mentioned here. Are you doing your best? Did you come when you were called? Are you doing your best? Then you get your reward. And we need to be humble. Jesus is trying to tell his apostles, trying to tell his listeners, you need to be humble, because the first will be last and last will be first. Do not assume because you have been here all along, you're going to get something greater. You're not. You're going to get exactly what you were promised. If that's a heavenly home, or if that's for eternal life, okay. If the Jews, as they believed, because that this meant that we would be blessed here on earth, then you will receive your blessings of love. If you're a non-believer, Jesus still has a message for you. His message in this parable is, do good and you'll receive the benefits. There are no more benefits. Bill Gates, I'll use this as an example. Bill Gates, wealthy individual. When he retired from Microsoft, him and his wife, Melinda, they created a foundation, gave over half their fortune, and they do good work around the world. A widow comes, helps cook, food for invalids, the elderly, doesn't have anything to give, but just a little bit of time. We already know God looks at both the same. We already know that God treats not one better than the other, because if you're giving what you're capable of giving, your reward is the same. That inner love that dwells in us, that feeling of, I call it that Christmas morning feeling, not when I got a gift, but when I gave a gift to that child or to that loved one, and they opened it and they were so excited and they were so happy that they received that love that you feel, that happiness, that joy, that's God. I'm reminded of the musical Les Miserables, the ending song. To love another person is to see the face of God. And that's what I think Jesus is trying to get across to his apostles and to his followers. Quit fixating on rank and privilege and prestige. Quit fixating on how much you got or how much you're going to get or how much, money and wealth. That's unimportant, because your real reward's inside. The love you feel and the love that you have and receive, the forgiveness, the contentment, that's truly important. And you get that through giving it to others. And that's ties into last week's parable about forgiveness. We said that last time. If you can't forgive someone else, how can you expect forgiveness? But when you forgive others, you're showing love. And so you can expect it in return. Now, we also know from other parables, may not happen exactly when we expect it and don't know, the way we expect it, but it's going to happen. An interesting thing, an interesting little tidbit about this parable, and I'm going to then open it up for any other discussions or questions or comments, is that this parable was used by a art critic by the name of John Ruckus in 1860s. He created a pamphlet or a 4-part series in a magazine, and he titled it Unto This Last. It wasn't religious. He never discussed religion. Don't even know he was a Christian. He left Christianity, came back. But his whole premise about this passage that he used in his writing unto this last was the idea that what Jesus was hinting towards was dignity. Understand, this was during the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. This was in England. Things were not very good for workers. Society was kind of turned upside down. And what he said, or what he used this parable as a message of promoting a social economy. Now, he said, what's a social economy? Think about cooperatives. Think about charities. Think about credit unions. Think about any business, 501c3s, or any business that is about the betterment of people. Think about the Christmas Carol, goodwill, charity, kindness. That should have been my business. That's what John Ruskin said that he thought this parable was about. And he used this as a reason, as a call for social justice, for protecting the elderly, maybe having pensions for them, possibly having even work study for students, vocational training, so that they actually would have a job and pay them while they're learning. A lot of the things that we try to do today, back in England in 1860s, came about part and parcel because of the look of this parable, as it was about being good to each other and being what's fair. And some would even argue that the fact that everybody got their daily wage, they got a living wage, that meant it is important to make sure people get what they need when they're paid, and not paid just on a simple hourly basis. Maybe, there's an argument, and I'm not going to get too far into these weeds because I'm running out of time. There was an argument that many have made about the idea of a living wage. You get enough to live on, whatever your job is. That's what John Ruskin said. Ruskin said that this, in his opinion, what it was talking about. And it's interesting that because he wrote that pamphlet, Gandhi became a big proponent of the pamphlet unto this last, and he incorporated in a lot of his teachings about nonviolence, about social equity, about social justice. And I bring this up because it has nothing to do with being a Christian per se, other than, number one, it showed how this parable can be used and is used by people of different faiths, of different nationalities around the world, and how the purpose of the parable is. But the second is to bring up that idea, maybe Jesus is talking about social justice. Maybe he is talking about economic justice. Maybe he is talking about fairness, and not necessarily get what get as much as you can, or get as much as you deserve, but get what you need. And don't worry about the rest, because if you got what you need, that's all you need. So, thoughts, any ideas, questions, comments? I know I threw a lot out there today. Maybe somebody has a thought they'd like to share. Maybe they have a disagreement. Maybe they look at things a little bit different. You're welcome to comment if you'd like. All right. I guess I guess everybody's just kind of chewing on it and soaking it in, and that's fine. That is quite all right with that. All right, we're about out of time for today. In fact, this is one of the longer ones we've had in a while. So I want to leave you with something. I'm just checking my notes to make sure I got everything I want. All right. Yeah. We're going to think about, all right, we've talked about how this parable, could possibly be used at, how we treat each other, how we get what we think we deserve, how we get what we think we need, how the generosity of Jesus, of God, is like the kingdom of heaven. Next week, we're going to talk about how our acts, how we act, how, if we're living, if we truly have the love of Christ in us, if we're truly involved or in the kingdom of heaven, how are our actions going to be manifest? Maybe more of a kingdom of God story. We'll see. So if there are no other questions or thoughts, I appreciate everyone being with us today. And I'm going to end the recording now.